And then.
I'll get
Class after class after class. I'm waiting for him to get the mic.
Oh, wow, thank you so much.
I like cash. Cash is fine, bro.
I love cash.
I me too. I don't walk home.
You live in LA? Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Fantastic. Do I have
Just
to
bringing
fill
cash,
out
is that what you
the
said?
whole thing?
Yeah,
Or-
okay.
They just put the,
Some people, they just-
That's it? Okay.
I'm looking at it back.
Thank you.
Can you guys at
Well,
home
but
hear
the
me?
time you spent there.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
yes, we can.
Anyone? Can you guys hear me at home?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. There was a class that ran a little late, so I think there are several people who have gone downstairs to move their cars and run back up. I can wait a couple of minutes for them, but I'm not gonna wait too long because I have an appointment. So in the meantime, I'm gonna pull up a residential listing agreement. I recommend that you do the same. Even better if you have a printed copy, but if not, that's okay. I'll be sharing my screen and also broadcasting in the classroom.
Thanks for today. It was fabulous.
Thank you so much.
I still have your introvert, but
I am.
I'll look back to that later. Bye. No, you're fine. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they.
All right, can everyone at home see our first document titled Disclosure Regarding Real Estate Agency Relationship?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, so I'll start with the disclosures. I'll give you a kind of brief overview. The disclosures that accompany the listing contract, they accompany every contract. You'll see the same disclosures in a residential purchase agreement. They accompany them every time because every time you write a contract of any sort, whether it's accepted or not, or executed, you accompany it. They're automatically included in.
Jesse, there's a background conversation going on that's making it hard to hear you.
All right, so these disclosures are automatically included with the listing contract, just as they are with the purchase contract in zip form, so you don't have to add them, you don't have to remember them, they'll show up every single time. Just a quick reminder, guys, I don't monitor the chat box because I minimize the screen here so that I can focus on the document that I'm discussing with you guys. So if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me. A lot of times I use acronyms. I'm doing this accidentally. Please stop me, ask me what I'm talking about. If I use terminology you're not familiar with, stop me, ask what I'm talking about. You know, if your questions are off topic, I'll let you know and we can talk about it after class. I generally give some time for people to ask questions if there's leftover time. This is a shorter class, so I think there will be leftover time. But if it's relevant to what we're talking about, I'm very happy to answer. All right, so our first document, disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships, also referred to as the AD. You'll see acronyms on all of the forms that you can pull from the Zip Forms library. We'll also give you a revision date, 12/18. So Zip Forms in the state, or the state is the one that drafts all of our documents for you, for us. And they update them all the time without telling us anything. So I never want you to think that you know a document by heart. Look at it every single day. All right.
Thanks.
Mhm. Yeah, bless you.
Thanks.
That was a cute sneeze. And so the agency disclosure just goes over the duties of a seller's agent, buyer's agent, an agent providing dual representation. And I'd like to remind you that dual representation doesn't mean you as the agent providing representation to both the buyer and seller. It can, but it means any two agents from the same brokerage. So any of you and I, if we're working together, I'm repping buyer, you're repping seller, we're dual agency technically, okay? What a seller and buyer's responsibilities are in the transaction. Though I'm not going through these line by line, you should read these. You need to understand them, because if your clients have questions and you can't answer those questions, it doesn't reflect well on you as a real estate professional guiding them through one of the most important purchases or sales they ever make, right? So you need to know at least generally what these documents mean through and through. Okay. The second disclosure is fair housing and discrimination advisory. It goes over the federally protected classes. Okay, and so if you have clients, you know, I actually most of the time find discrimination in leasing. I'll have a client who's like, I really don't want to lease to a family with children because they're going to tear up my apartment, right, or my house. And you can see right here, familial status, family with a child or children under 18, that's a protected status. So I'll let my client know, well, we can't do that because that violates federal fair housing law. However, I'm going to provide you an application which will include all of the proposed applicants, whether they're adults or not. You can accept or decline to move forward with an application for whatever reason. It can't be this reason, but you don't have to tell me a reason at all. And I leave it at that. I've been pretty fortunate where I haven't had clients who, you know, engaged in discrimination other than that fairly common situation. So read through this. You'll need to know these things. This is a really good outline also to know what kind of advertising language you can use. So if you ever have a listing, guys, and if you're filling out a residential listing agreement, you hopefully will, right? It's very likely. You'll write a description for the MLS. And sometimes descriptive words that you wouldn't think of as discrimination technically are. So like the term walking distance, that discriminates against people who don't have the ability to walk, which would be protected under disability, okay? You know, great for a young professional couple or family neighborhood, things like this, they're all protected because if someone doesn't have a family and is interested in the property, that statement that's geared towards someone with children is discrimination. And I know we don't mean it that way, but it can get flagged in the MLS and you can get fined. So just be careful, be wary of things like that. All right. All right, let's scroll down to the next document here. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. Yes, question.
Sorry,
No worries.
I'm new with this. But sometimes when I'm looking at places online or whatever, it will say walking distance.
Yes.
And I see that a lot of times.
Yes, it's very common. And if you'd like to report those people, there's a little flag. It's anonymous.
Okay.
And you can report a violation. The MLS and a box will pop up and you can state what type of violation it is, and then you can give the details. I'm not super petty about that kind of stuff usually. My former employers that I'm not so fond of continuously do it, even though I told them about it, you know, 15 years ago. So I might be petty in that instance.
What about schools? Is it okay to list?
Yes, it's okay to list the schools, but you better be right. Otherwise, you have liability. What else? What I do flag constantly on the MLS, like someone will list a duplex as a single family because it's detached or something like that. I will flag those because, you know, those show up in my search results and it makes me look bad with my clients, like I'm not listening to them and sending them what they want. Or I'll get a townhouse, it's technically a condo, we don't have townhouses legally in California, only single family, multi-family, which is income, or condos. There's no classification for townhome is style in the state of California.
So in my little building
Mhm.
here in Beverly Hills, it's a duplex, but it's just one room up the stairs, and they listed it as a townhouse, and it's.
There's no way to list it as a townhouse on the MLS.
Okay.
So you can use a descriptive word townhouse, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So stuff like that, that messes up search results because it's clearly just wrong, or an agent who sticks a property that's technically in Hollywood. I myself have done it on purpose because it was right on the border of West Hollywood. West Hollywood is so much more desirable, right?
Yep.
You can get flagged for, and you'll have a certain time period in which to change it. Otherwise, the MLS will find you and notify Michael Rosales. All right, so possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. This is especially important with the listing agreement, right? Because you have no idea who is going to represent the buyer, right? No clue. This is included with a residential purchase agreement as well. I'm not certain why, because you have a pretty good indication of who the listing agent is at that point, who you're going to be working with. But very important. That's why it's included. Wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. This is included again with all contracts, but it's not so relevant for a seller because it is very, very rare that a seller wires funds at all when they're selling their property, unless they owe more to the bank than they're able to sell it for. And in our area, generally property value doesn't really decrease. And if it does, it's very insignificant, usually not enough for a seller to have to bring funds in. But let's say they did for some reason, let's say they took out a second loan, a private loan, and they owed more on their home, then they'd have to wire funds to escrow in order to pay off the bank in order to close the escrow, right? And so, the explanation for this, because it looks very scary, is just to a buyer or seller, hey, well, escrow companies can only legally send you wire instructions through an encrypted email. If they're being sent any other way, you need to pick up the phone, find independent telephone number for the escrow office, ask for the escrow officer by calling the main line, ask if they sent those wire instructions, and if they say no, it's fraud. If they say yes, say, well, it wasn't encrypted, can you please send it via encrypted email as required? They will, and then you're gonna call back with your client, three-way call, and you're gonna verify those wire instructions with the client, verbally with the escrow officer, okay? Perfect, moving on. I should just say, what's happening with this wire fraud is that people are somehow finding out about a sale, somehow getting contact information for buyer or seller, pretending to be escrow and or title, requesting funds and giving them fraudulent wire instructions. Once that money is wired, it is almost impossible, if not impossible, to get back, which means your deal is probably no longer happening. Moving forward, we have the residential listing agreement now, also referred to as the RLA, revised as recently as 6/21. At the top left corner, you're gonna have date prepared. This is a very important date because it's a legal reference date. Anytime you draft documentation that is in accordance with contractual obligations you must take that are identified in our listing contract, it will ask you to identify this date. Okay, so this is the date you draft the document. It's not the date it's signed. It's not the date the listing agreement becomes effective. It's just the date you drafted it. Sometimes clients will say to me, oh, this is the wrong date. Today's date is, October 27th. Does it matter? No. But can I fix it? Can I change it for them versus arguing? Yes. They don't accept my explanation right off. I'm very happy to just change the date because technically I just revised it. So the document is dated as of today, right? Exclusive right to sell. This is the name of your seller. You need to be very careful here, okay? So the name of your seller needs to be all the names of the either individuals or the accurate name of the entity that holds title to the property. The legal way that title is held is referred to as vesting. Vesting is more escrow and title terminology, but it'll make you seem fancy when you're talking escrow or title. Where can we get this information to make sure it's accurate?
Title company?
Yeah, you should get it from your title rep or from title software. that your title rep sets you up with. So if you don't have access to title software, you should get that from the title rep you have a relationship with. And the reason for this is because most of the time when we need to get this information, it's usually after hours or on weekends, and you won't always have easy access to your title rep at that time. Okay. I discourage you very strongly from asking for, or not asking for, from pulling the ownership information from the property record section of the MLS. And this is because it has a limited amount of characters. It's not always accurate. Okay, and we need all the names of the sellers here or the accurate entity name for your contract to be valid. If the name is incorrect, it's not valid. This includes initials, middle names. It needs to match title. Okay. What's an example of an entity, guys?
Company, limited liability.
An LLC, yeah, an LLC, corporation, trust, can be a few other things. It can, it will just say on title, all right? There is a box and another document that has to accompany the listing agreement if the property is held in the name of the title. And also some, if the property is held in the name of a trust, there's something called a trust advisory that should accompany the listing agreement, okay? We'll go over those things when we get to it. All right, so this needs to be correct. Hereby employs and grants, broker. What goes here, guys?
Brokerage company.
Yeah. A lot of people put their name in here. A lot of agents put their name in here. That's not accurate. It should say Keller Williams Beverly Hills. All right. Beginning date and ending date. This is your listing period. This can be problematic because when you take a listing, you don't necessarily know when the listing is going to be ready for photography and ready to place on the market. Okay. However, you do not have a valid listing if these lines are blank. So I'm going to teach you a workaround. Okay. Unless there is a target date and it's far enough off for you to safely say, I'm going to start my listing this date, you shouldn't just put projected future dates in there. Okay. And you have no right to market the property off market unless the date here is the same or sooner than when you're discussing this property. I like to have my listings valid the day that my client signs them. This poses a problem as it's not ready for market, and there's a rule that a property must go into the MLS within 2 days of this date. So what do? Well, I go ahead and I put the date that my clients sign it, okay? And I put my end date. Can anyone tell me what the standard listing period is?
6 months.
6 months. Can you do more or less?
Yes.
Yes. If you do less, right, that's a risk for you as a business owner, because if it doesn't sell, you put time and money into it, right? So I think for myself, the shortest time frame I'm comfortable with doing is 3 months, especially in a market like we have now. That's going back to a much more normal market. Also, if the seller is not taking my recommended list price, I think, oftentimes it's going to take longer to sell. I might need a price reduction, which the seller might be reluctant to give me, might take me some time if I get it at all. And then courts have deemed that listing contracts over a period of 12 months are not really fairly enforceable. Any idea why that might be? Why a court might come in, circumvent, and say this is not really ethical? It's because market conditions can change so much. So technically, a seller's obligated to sell based on the terms in the listing agreement. Not that I've ever seen an agent enforce it, and probably wouldn't be very good for your reputation or career if you tried to do so. So let's say pre-pandemic, I list my house with, Susie Q at $1 million. 4 months later, my home is worth at least $250,000 more because there was just such an inflation in prices. These are just hypotheticals, right? Technically, I, as a seller, if Susie Q obtained an offer for $1 million, would be required to accept it if it included all of the other terms that I had told Susie Q I wanted in my sale. So this is a technicality, and the reason I think it's not enforced is because oftentimes as a marketing ploy, we encourage sellers to underprice property, right? So we can have a lot of interest, so we can get multiple, so we can maybe get more of the price. But this is why I believe courts have deemed that having a listing period of longer than 12 months isn't really enforceable or ethical. All right. Okay, so if I want to go ahead and start the listing as of today, but I know I'm not ready to put it on the MLS in 2 days. There are 2 reasons that I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to use section 7D, seller instructs broker not to market, 72, sorry. Seller instructs broker not to market the property to the public. I'm gonna check this box, okay? And when I check this box, part form SELM, which stands for seller instruction to exclude from the multiple listing service. You don't need to remember the name. If you write down SELM and you type that into zip forms in the search box, it'll pop up for you, okay? What this does is it makes it an actual pocket listing, okay? So side note, pet peeve of mine, people say they have a pocket. You don't actually have a pocket listing unless you have a signed listing agreement in SELM. Okay, what you have is a seller lead, a listing lead. You have an off-market potential sale. Okay, so if you don't have a listing agreement and you tell me you have a pocket, I'm going to be pretty upset with you when I find out you don't. Why? Because if I'm bringing a buyer, my commission's not outlined. There's no agreement to pay me. So I'm not going to show this property to my buyer until you either have a listing agreement or what's called a single party agreement where the seller signs an agreement to pay me, and probably you too, if my buyer buys the property. Okay, so I'm going to skip back to the top after we get through this section. This could be problematic because I do want to go on the MLS at some point, right? When I'm ready. And if I go on the MLS, which I can do by modifying the terms of the contract in a subsequent document called modification to existing terms or modification to listing agreement, they changed it around. If you search modification in the search bar and zip forms, you'll find it. It will show the days on market on the MLS from the date of my listing start period. So I do 2 things. I change 2 things when I'm ready to go on market. I use this modification form, and my first item is car form SELM, dated whatever date you drafted it, is hereby deleted in its entirety. And item 2, listing period, is hereby amended to begin on blank day, the day you want to put it on the MLS, and then whatever your time frame is after, and end on blank day. And you also have to have a time for ending for it to be legally valid. The normal time is 11:59 p.m. Okay, so that's how you get around having a listing active, yet not being ready to place in the MLS. And you'll show 0 days on market as you want to, because days on market without an offer, sellers perceive that as an undesirable property. There's some stigma. All right. Back up here.
So
Remember,
the seller need to sign again? Or it's just
yeah, they have to sign the modification, of course. So again, you do not, this is a common mistake, but you don't have a valid contract, which means you do not have a listing if you don't have dates here.
So the date here, you put the date he signed, right? And then later.
I put the day that they sign, yeah. If it's, you know, but that's only because it gives me the ability to shop it off market. And also, you know, if I know what day it's gonna go on and they're my repeat clients or whatever, I'm really ethical. I don't believe I'm gonna get my client the best price by shopping off market, right? And maybe you wanna avoid this situation too, because how do they get the best price? They get the best price by having a lot of exposure, which means a lot of showings, which means hopefully multiple interested parties, which hopefully means multiple offers, which means competition and hopefully best terms and price.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Today. If you do your beginning day and the end day, and by the end day you get a sale, you just sign it.
You would have to sign an extension, yes. Mhm. Yeah. It's called, I don't remember if it's on the modification or extension of time addendum. ETA, cute, right? All right, so next is the address. Guys, in the LA area, we have a lot of area names, okay? Westwood, Brentwood, North Hollywood, Hollywood. These are all actually city of LA. Okay, we have only a few independent cities. I'll name the ones I can think of. Culver City, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Inglewood. The rest, I think, unless you go further down south, they're all city of LA. This is really important for you to be a reminder to you, because certain cities have additional transfer requirements, things that are required in order to close an escrow, that are beyond what the state requires, and the city of LA is one of them, right? So I always put Los Angeles into my contract, and I'll put the area name. Even though the area name will go into the MLS, and that's totally fine. And this is just because I want to make sure whoever gets my contracts knows it's city of LA, and there's a tip to my TC, there's a reminder to me, this is actually city of LA, and there are 2 things I need for city of LA that I don't need in most cities. Anyone have an idea what those 2 things are? Come on, gold stars.
Zip code,
No. 9A building report, the city of Los Angeles building report, and something called the certificate of compliance, which is in relation to retrofitting. Retrofitting is a general term for bringing pre-existing items up to a higher safety standard. Okay, and so don't get confused. Like if you're asking if there's any retrofitting required in an area that doesn't need it, and someone's like, "What are you talking about?" You probably don't need any retrofitting. If you don't know about the city that you're listing something in, it's a great time to ask an escrow officer in that area. They will definitely know if there's any additional transfer requirement. Yes.
in Beverly Hills, there is no retrofitting guidelines.
I think there's some required, but I'm not sure that a certificate is involved, and so
That's
people
true.
get confused. But again, you can ask an escrow officer, but if you want to get specific, because I don't think escrow requires it for Beverly Hills, depends. I would ask a retrofitting company. A lot of the retrofitting companies, Metro Retro, LGS retrofitting, you can Google whatever, ask around in the office for referrals. They will have on their website cities and what the requirements are, and they will say yes, no, what you need. They won't tell you about the building reports. Okay. Yes.
Does this also pertain to places in the valley like Studio City?
Yeah, they're all LA.
All LA?
Mhm.
Okay.
And where can you find, if you don't know, where can you find out if it's city of Los Angeles? Title software. Yep. So we talked about vesting, which is the legal owner name, how they hold title, right? Legal description or exhibit A is referred to as the property description is referred to as exhibit A or legal description. And there's this key term in there always, and it doesn't have all of these pieces always, but it will have some of them. It will say something like lot 123 in tract 568 of block 19, located in the city of, and that is your keyword. The city of, those are your keywords, and next to it will say the legal city. Okay. And you'll see this on title software. You can get this from the title rep, or that you can just ask them and they can tell you. All right, don't forget the zip code. And then assessor parcel number, commonly referred to, almost always referred to as APN number. This is very important. This is very important because this is a much stronger legal identification to escrow title and entities within the county and city as to a property's location and information about it. And these numbers are dictated by county. So there's a format for Los Angeles County. That format is always going to be a 4-digit dash 3-digit dash 3-digit number. If you see anything different, there's either a mistake or you're not in the county of Los Angeles, the property you're looking at. Okay. On a rare occasion, you will not be able to find an APN number. Okay. Let me tell you about the 2 rare occasions that I know. If you can't find an APN number, don't fool yourself. Call your title rep and ask them why that is. Very likely one of 2 things. A,
Mobile home?
no. A, it's new construction and it hasn't been issued through certificate of occupancy yet, or the lot that has an APN number associated with it has recently been combined with another and it hasn't been official, or it's been subdivided, meaning it was one parcel and now it's been broken out into many, or it was several parcels or 2 and they were combined. Okay? So all kind of part of new construction. The next one is A condo, okay, there are a few that I know of, Marina City Club and Ocean Towers in Santa Monica. So Marina City Club's in Marina City, or Marina Del Rey. Ocean Towers is in Santa Monica. These buildings don't actually own the land upon which the buildings are built. They are leased. They are long-term lease. And the city of Los Angeles has started stepping in and forced buying these leases from the individuals that own them so that these individuals can't extort huge lease amounts for renewal. Because obviously you can't pick up your condo from the building and go put it someplace else, right? So these are called land leases. And so you won't see an APN number associated with it because the parcel is not owned, the land is not owned, okay?
Who owns that county owned property?
Huh?
Does the county own the property?
The city of Los Angeles in a lot of cases, and sometimes individuals. But the city of LA has really started buying those up to make sure there are no problems. Okay. The next box is for a mobile home. You may or may not be able to assist a mobile home owner with their sale. There's one very easy criteria to know if you can or not. Do they own the land upon which the mobile home sits, or do they not? If they do, you can help them. If they do not, it's something else, and it's much more like an automobile sale than it is a real estate sale, because there's a park that is leasing the land to them, but there's no real permanently affixed property on that lot. It's movable. It's a mobile home, right? So if they own the land, yes, you can help them. If they do not, you may not. Your licensure does not cover that. All right, the next box is for a sale that's part of a probate. I'm not going to go into that. But I will tell you there's two types of probate. One is very simple and should be no problem. That is probate without court confirmation. Okay. There is just a couple of extra documents for that type of sale and disclosure. And you may have an attorney involved and several parties. Probate with court confirmation is very complicated as far as timeframes. It's not hard to work, but there's a lot of extra requirements in advertising and timeframes and court appearances. And it is not difficult, or it's very difficult for a buyer to purchase it with a loan. However, there is 100% an attorney who has absolutely all the knowledge in the world about what needs to be done in this case. They can walk you through it. Or if you want to get that attorney's business, it's usually the attorney referring that business to you. You probably want to know ahead of time. So you learn that with Michael Rosales. I do believe there is one probate class from a couple of years ago on my YouTube channel if you want to watch it. All right. Conservatorship, guardianship, or receivership, there's always going to be an attorney involved with these, and they're going to help you out with what you need, with anything extra you might need to do. Okay. Listing price and terms. The listing price shall be blank dollars. Who determines this number, guys? That's right. Do they always listen?
No.
No. Again, not every listing's a good listing. It is up to you. You're a business owner. You get to decide if this is a price at which you want to take the listing, knowing full well that the seller is not obligated to give you a price reduction. And if the property is overpriced, you may not receive offers at all. And if you do, they're likely going to be closer to the actual property value, and the seller may not accept them. So it's a risk to you. A lot of times, if that is the case and I still want to take the listing, maybe we're not too far off, I may use item 2B listing terms, and I may write in some language to contractually bind my seller to a price reduction at a certain time frame within our listing period if we don't receive and accept an offer at the price we were originally listed at. Usually I put that in there at 30 days. So I might say, seller agrees to reduce price to blank dollars if they have not received and accepted an offer by blank date. You will still need a modification of terms to change the price, which the seller will have to sign. Okay, but I just like to hedge my bets here. If I'm going to do something that I'm not comfortable with, I'm not confident in, I want that seller to agree a lot of times because I'm putting my money to market it and I'm giving my time, which is very valuable to me. All right, compensation to broker. So the seller pays both agents commission. Okay, and that is always set in a listing agreement between just the listing agent and the seller. So when you see that reduced commission on the MLS offered to the buyer's agent, you can thank that listing agent for that. What is the standard commission, guys? The standard, yes, 5. Thank you. I usually hear a lot of 6s. Okay. 6, I've only had a couple of in my career. If you go in there asking for 6, I think most savvy homeowners, and they've been through the process once already, if they own a home to sell, most of the time. Most time it's not inherited. They know that it's 5%, and all day long, someone like me who's got 20 years of experience is gonna be right behind you offering 5 without a problem. Okay, so you might shoot yourself in the foot if you ask for 6. Now, I do occasionally ask for 6 when I go above and beyond my agent duties. Perhaps my owner is out of the country, wants me to oversee remodel and repair work for them. I need to provide access and things like that. Maybe I've done some extensive work for them for free in the past on listings or on leases or tenants or things like that, provided them with a lot of advice and time. Then I might, ask for 6 in the sale, that kind of thing. Yes.
Oh, okay, so on my new paperwork today, it did say 6%, but I said, isn't it usually 5? Because you usually see 2.5. So is it just standard to?
It's standard at 5.
It is.
It is standard at 5.
Okay.
Yeah. You're going to get a cold reception if you start at 6, generally speaking.
And what is the lowest?
So the brokerage, you will have to get permission from either Michael Rosales or Josh Spitzen if you're ever going to do below 5%. There are a lot of instances in which you may do something like that. Maybe a repeat client, maybe someone who's selling several properties with you, perhaps a developer client who purchased the property from you. A lot of times they're looking for a reduced commission once it's rehabbed and they're flipping the sale because they list it with you, or that's generally what happens. So there's also the option to put in a flat dollar amount. This is not typically used. Why? Because the listing price is not necessarily indicative of the price that the sale closes at. Yeah. If you're going to ever try to use this option or a client wants to, you'll need to obtain Michael Rosales' permission for that. Okay. All right. The next item here under 3A2, this is called the exclusions clause, and this is very important for you as a listing agent, particularly if you're not confident this property is going to sell. Okay, but also because people get crazy. So if you keep track of everyone that you've shown the property to, whether it's an open house or a showing, okay, during your listing period, and you provide, and your listing is going to cancel or expire, you provide this list to the seller before it cancels or expires. If anyone thereafter that entered the property or saw it during your listing, whose name is on that list, buys it within whatever time frame you've written into this space right here, then you are entitled to the commission and would step back in to represent the seller. This applies also to affiliates and subsidiaries and family members of the people that you showed the property to. How would you find out? That's the tricky part, but I have seen this happen many a time. A lot of times the seller's relationship with the previous listing agent is not so good, otherwise they would have extended, right? And so sometimes the 2 listing agents decide to co-rep, or the new listing agent will basically just cough up 50% of their commission and work with the seller, because it's very hard to work with a seller who no longer likes you or wants to work with you, right? So the most standard time frame that is entered in this box, or this blank, is 180 days, which is 6 months. It can be more or less, that is up to you, but remember, a shorter period of time could be riskier for you. I don't like to do less than 3 months here, but again, you can do whatever time frame you want. You do not need to ask the brokerage for permission about the exclusions period. All right. And again, the sections I'm not going through, I don't think are particularly important, like 3, but you need to read this entire document. You need to know it, because if your client has any question and asks you and you don't know the answer, you don't look like you know what you're doing, right? And that's very important that you do. Even if you don't understand it 100%, having a general idea of what it means or pertains to is going to be really important. a lot of times the client will say something like, oh, well, what does this mean? And I'll say, oh, well, we have to have a mutually signed cancellation before the market can be, or before a property can be withdrawn from the market. That would include my broker's signature, right? That's not a full explanation. There's more to this than that, but most clients are gonna be okay with that, okay? All right. Section C, in addition, seller agrees to pay broker. This is very rarely used, but on a rare occasion, seller might say, if you can sell this for full price in less than 30 days, I'm gonna give you an additional 10 grand. Can we do that? You should check with Michael Rosales to make sure that it is legally enforceable and it's written accurately, so it's clear and enforceable, but it's unusual. Anytime you free form write things into blanks on contracts, I want to make sure that you run it past mentor, Michael Rosales, someone like me, someone with a lot of contract experience to guide you, because even if it's clear and makes sense, it might affect some other part of the contract that would need to be addressed as well that you're not aware of.
So for example, you said that the writing there, what you state is very important. So how would you write that yourself? If I could do, and I see.
We'll talk about that after class. It's gonna be a very rare instance, so yeah. Seller has been advised of broker's policy regarding cooperation with basically the other agents, other brokerages, okay? So this is the section where you're gonna check this box and you're gonna say what percent of the purchase price in commission is being offered to the buyer's agent. Remember, we've entered the total commission the seller's paying because the seller pays both agents' commissions. Okay. Now we're saying how much percent is going to the buyer's agent. So what is considered standard and ethical?
2.5.
50% of whatever the total commission is. So if the commission's 4, 2. Now, a lot of times the seller's going to try to hit you up for commission. And one of the things that might help you to get them up in commission, hopefully it's yours as well, not just the buyer's agent, is some agents, though it's not legal or ethical, will not show their buyer's property that doesn't have a minimum of 2.5% commission offered to the buyer. And while I'm ethical and I would never do that, I tell these sellers, you might miss that buyer who's willing to pay significantly more. You might be losing money by reducing commission. This does happen. And so I have had a successful breakthrough with sellers, who are trying to whittle me down to 4 or 4.5% on commission, go back up to 5. Unfortunately, I've also had some go from 4 to 4.5 just so they can do the 2.5 to the buyer's agent or whatever. But you know what? Fine. Now, let's say you are you're lucky enough to either get 6% commission because you earned it in some other way. Should you give 3% of that 6 to the buyer's agent? It depends. It really depends. It can help you to sell the property sooner. It may not, right? Because ultimately it's up to the buyer, and the buyer doesn't care what the buyer's agent is paid. And I've earned it, because I put more work in. It is okay to take 3.5% and offer 2.5 to the buyer's agent in this instance. However, when you put this property on the MLS, there's a lot of criteria you have to enter on your MLS listing. One of them is disclosures. That disclosure to say you have to basically disclose this, although no one knows what this means, and so nobody does it. In fact, the first time I had to do it, or even realize that this option to select was in the MLS, I went to my managing broker at the time and I'm like, what does this mean? It's called listing broker advantage. Don't worry about selecting it. No one's gonna look at it. No one's even gonna know what it means. Okay? But technically and legally, you should be disclosing that on the MLS. All right. Again, if you've done a flat commission option, check with Michael Rosales. Same rules apply to flat rate. It should be 50% unless there's extenuating circumstances. And no matter how much commission is offered to you, it really should be a minimum of 2.5% for the buyer unless the commission is under 5%. All right. And even if the commission is under 5%, that doesn't mean you take 2.5 and you offer 1.5 to the buyer's agent. You still, the worst you should ever be doing is half to the buyer's agent, unless there's an extenuating circumstance of extra service you provide. All right. This line is very important. It is 3F1. This line is very important if you are ever taking a listing that has expired or canceled. Why? Well, it was previously listed if it expired or it was canceled. And so you'll need to write down the name of the brokerage and agent that previously had it listed. Okay. And then this is the time you ask your seller, we talked about an exclusions list, right? That previous agent may have provided an exclusions list to your seller. You'll need to get a copy of that because, again, legally, it's our responsibility to be honest and ethical and check this list. If we receive offers and accept one from whoever these buyers are, I'll glance at it. Am I gonna look at who their affiliates are and ask about their family members? No, and I think that's kind of weird anyways. And so if they didn't receive a list, fantastic. Well, I know I'm already doing a better job than your previous agent. If they did provide a list, I would literally attach that list to the listing agreement and say, see attached exclusions list provided by previous broker. See here. This also tells you how risky it is. So yeah, those of you chasing those expired and canceled, this is always going to apply to you. All right, section F3, 3F3, section 3F3 is important very rarely, but it's very important when it applies. So I'll give you an example. I listed a property once and the homeowner said to me, hey, yeah, we want you to list it. We need to sell. We need to sell by a certain date. However, our neighbor has expressed interest in purchasing the property. And so if that happens, I want the ability to not work with you, not to have to pay commission because we're friends, we trust each other. They're sisters and escrow officer, they can help us out with the transaction. I can allow that. And so if that's the case, I'll put the names of those neighbors here. However, if that is the case, I will probably say, seller, I am more than happy to honor that. However, I would like for you to reimburse me for any costs I have in relation to the listing and marketing your property. Are you comfortable with that? And in this instance, the seller said yes. So in my contract, under the other terms, additional terms, I may or may not have enough room on this line, guys. And if you don't have enough room to write what you need to thoroughly, then you'll use what's called an addendum. So you would check a box to say that there's an addendum. Or maybe, I don't see it here. We'll look through the contract after we get through most of it. You'd say see attached addendum. Okay. So if you don't have enough space to write what you need to, you attach an addendum and you have to notate that the addendum exists on the contract somewhere. Yes.
In case the seller is an integrity efficient person and doesn't want to reimburse you for your expenses, then you just let it go.
I have never been in that situation, so I don't know. It probably would depend upon the amount of money. If it's going to small claims court and suing your former client is probably not worth my time depending on the dollar amount. And even if it was, it might hurt my reputation because the full story might not be out there. Just the fact that I sued my former seller who wants to work with an agent that sues their client, right?
Yeah.
So, the story they're going to tell is, oh, well, we sold it to our neighbor and that was agreed to, right? So the language I'd use is something like, you really have to think about this as seller to reimburse listing agent for actual marketing costs in the event that they sell to the parties named in section blah, 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 what was it, 3F3, something like that. Provide within, and I put a time frame, within blank days of providing copies of receipts for all expenses to seller, right? Okay, so back on up now. Here, yeah, 3F3. All right, 4A, items excluded and included. So, though you're going to talk about this item is really important just because you need to have this conversation with the seller to set up your transaction and potential sale properly. So, You're gonna explain to your seller what is included by legal definition. The legal definition states that anything permanently affixed should be included with sale. This means a television mount, but not the TV. This means curtain rods and blinds, but not curtain panels, not actual curtains, right? However, you should never be in doubt, so you should just be very clear, okay? It's better to be clear than be buying light fixtures or appliances for people later. So you're gonna ask your seller, they're gonna say, oh, what's normally included. They may wanna keep some of their appliances, they may wanna leave them. It's more customary to leave them. But it's not, they may say it's negotiable. And so under additional items excluded, you might wanna say, washer and dryer are negotiable. These are more for notes. You'll put these into private remarks in the MLS. But it doesn't matter what you tell the buyer, doesn't matter what you tell their agent, doesn't matter what's in the MLS, doesn't matter what's in your listing agreement, because it's not binding unless it's agreed to by the buyer. And that only happens in what document, guys? Purchase agreement or subsequent counteroffer. Okay. So the buyer can't be bound to something that only the seller and listing agent know about, right? So this is just so you know when you position the property correctly. Same thing with items included. All right, and don't just, don't assume, like put clear notes here, even if something is clearly included and the seller wants it to be included, just write it on here. Same thing in the purchase contract, inclusions and exclusions. I'll give you an example. I had a listing agent in the desert, in the mountains. I sold my best friend a home there, and there was a Murphy bed. That is by legal definition affixed to the fucking wall. It's a Murphy bed. That is what a Murphy bed is, right? I wrote it into the contract because no point in not making it extremely clear, right? Better to be safe than be sorry. Plus, these agents didn't seem like they knew what they're doing. Never assume that somebody knows what the legal definition is or what's required. The sellers left the bed there as they were supposed to because I think they actually read the contract unlike the listing agent. The listing agent liked it, took it and stole it, and then tried to not bring it back. But, I was able to huff and puff and say, look, it's in the contract. It is already included by legal definition, but I made it extremely clear. You've now stolen my client's property. I didn't go there first. That was nice at first. This is like weeks and weeks. And I'm like, she's like, well, I'm not bringing it back. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to file an ethics complaint against you. And I'm going to walk my clients through filing a small claims court case against you. And guess what? They're going to win both. Period. So just be clear, guys. If you write into the contract, most of the time that's not going to happen. Usually won't get someone this bad who doesn't read the contract. Okay. Moving on. Leased or not owned items. Sometimes there is an item that is permanently affixed to a property that's not even really removable or usable outside of the property, but the homeowner does not own this item. They're leasing it. So in order to sell the home, the lease of that item has to be either transferred to the buyer, which is the most common, or maybe that company says it's not a transferable lease. Therefore, the seller must pay it off through the close of escrow in order to sell the property. And this might make it so that the seller can't even sell the property. Maybe it's too high of a dollar amount. I have seen this instance before. So if you talk to your seller and they say, oh yeah, I have solar panels and they're leased, you'll want to get a copy of that lease contract for the solar panels from him immediately to make sure it's even transferable. And if it's not, to find out what the payoff amount is so that you can tell the seller so they know if they still can even sell, let alone want to. Okay, don't waste your time. Once you hear lease, get the lease contract, check. Sometimes they own them, great, no problem. And if they are transferable and leased, what do you need to know so that you can inform a buyer so they know if they want to move forward with the property purchase? They need to know what they'll be paying on that lease. Okay? They'll need to know the terms of that lease. There's a different listing agreement and purchase agreement for income property, but another commonly leased item in income property is washers and dryers. Yes.
If it's something like a solar panel, for instance, and their person doesn't want to take over their lease, and they request for that to be removed?
Not
Or is it
really.
not
The amount of money and effort that it's going to take,
Okay.
solar's probably not going to deal with. Yeah. I don't even know, like, then the seller has to pay it off anyway.
Or if it's like a washer and dryer or just something, can you? Like, request
A
that
washer
from
and
the-
dryer, yeah, you can ask. I mean, everything's negotiable in real estate. It may or may not be doable or make sense for one or both parties, but you can always ask. All right, multiple listing service. So we have an MLS, right? Not all agents have the same MLS. Okay, so like agents in the valley have a different MLS. You'll see like ours always start with the 2 numbers, which are the last 2 digits of the current year. So all of our MLS numbers, if we enter a listing right now, are gonna be 22 dash something. Okay. You'll see some that start with letters. We can see those listings, fine. It's called cooperating MLSs. So is it cool for me to list a property in the valley, even though I don't have MLS membership to the valley MLS? 100% because people in the valley can see them, right? The agents and the people there can see it. What about if someone's asking me to list a property where there's an MLS that doesn't cooperate with mine and I don't have membership to? Is that ethical for me to list that property? No, it's not. Why? Because the agents in that area will not see it. Therefore, many of the buyers that would typically be interested in that property are not going to see it through their agent. Okay. I've only run into this once in a really small town called, what's the name of it? I don't even remember the name of it. So I had a client relocate like close up to Mammoth, very small town. I was selling his house here. He asked me if I could help him with a purchase there. It went on the MLS. I couldn't find the area on the MLS. I also couldn't find any listings like on the MLS at all by entering the city names. And so I called up the MLS and they're like, oh, yeah, it probably doesn't cooperate with ours. And they sent me to a link of what cities do and do not cooperate with our MLS. So could I have still helped my client in some way? I could have sent a referral. I should send a referral because not only do I not know that area or have access to MLS, like I can't pull comps or advise, but it's also like a 5-hour drive away, right? So I'm not really going to be there. Most likely, maybe I have done out of area before. So I really should be referring that client to another agent in that area at that point in time. Or, you know, if I can get an agent to agree with it, maybe they'll co-rep with me. Although again, not super ethical because I'm not really providing co-representation. My ability to provide advice in that area is pretty low, right? So why is this important? Well, technically, if I list a property that is not in the area of my primary MLS coverage, I need to disclose that to the seller. But I also need this, knowledge so I can explain to the seller why this is not important. Because my MLS shows that MLS, everything. I think of it as one and the same almost, right? So our MLS is called CLAW, and it stands for Combined Los Angeles and West Side, and CLAW is going to go in this line here. However, even if I list a property in the valley, I do have to check this box that my MLS is not the primary MLS for that area, right? So very likely, until you have quite a bit of experience under you, you will need to be reaching out to the MLS to find out, or they'll send you the link to find the map or whatever for what does cooperate and what doesn't. I actually had a co-listing once because a listing agent in Pasadena listed something in Beverly Hills. Does their MLS cooperate with ours? Absolutely. But when his client saw this, he was not able to properly explain what I just explained to you about the cooperation. And so they made him, they forced him, they said, we will not list with you unless you take a co-listing agent that's out of the Beverly Hills office. And so I got 50% of the commission. I mean, I did work also, but you know, just by knowing that explanation, you can avoid that situation. All right, benefits of using the MLS. So sometimes a seller will say, I only want an off-market sale. I only want to be a pocket listing. Okay, remember, pocket listing has a signed listing contract still, and what document?
Purchase.
SELM, yes. Whether or not they opt to go that route, this box, both of you need to initial. But if they want to go that route, you should really go over section 6 with them. I know for some reason pocket listings are, you know, viewed as being kind of sexy or prestigious or something. But as a seller, honestly, it's very difficult to obtain the best price and terms unless you have exposure to the market, to as many buyers as possible. So I highly, recommend, or I strongly advise you to reconsider going that route and to actually list on the MLS with photos so that we can get you the best price and terms. Maybe they have a privacy reason for it. I don't know. Section 7, public marketing of property. Okay, so if you have a pocket listing, there are restrictions on how you can market this listing during the time it is not on the MLS. Once it's on the MLS, you can market it however you like, okay? But if you use my method of taking the listing as of the date that the seller signs it and modify it later with the deleting the SELM and changing the listing period date for the date you actually plan to put on the MLS, you can do both. The restriction, while it's a pocket listing, is that you can only tell other agents about it. You can tell your own clients directly about it as well, but it has to be one-on-one. It can't be anything public facing. So no social media that is not a closed group of agents or a direct message to your own contact. Okay, so no posting pocket listings on your Instagram page or your Facebook page. We do have a KW group of 14 offices that are all under a parent umbrella company, Forward Living, where you can post them so that you don't have to target people so specifically, target other agents so specifically. And why do you think that might be? It is, what?
Who wants privacy, whoever, what does want to put.
It's not about the privacy, it's so that we don't take advantage of our clients. The regulation is in place so that agents don't try to take pocket listings and only sell their listings that way so they can be dual agent and make double the commission. All right, coming soon. I, again, myself, avoid this because, if I put it coming soon, people are going to try to see it before it goes on the market, which means I'm playing favorites, right? Or it could be at least deemed that way. Maybe I'm going to show it to people who call me, but I'm not available for one that has an agent, but I am available for an unrep buyer. Whether or not I had any intention of doing that, I am now subject to someone stating that I've given preferential treatment to my own benefit of the possibility of double commission and dual representation. That's what I'm using coming soon. If you'd like to use coming soon for some reason and you're confident that you can avoid that situation, I don't know how to do it correctly because I've never done it. Talk to member Rosales and definitely ask the MLS what needs to take place in your documentation and how you handle it.
I see that all the time on Instagram.
Yeah, not legitimate. No. I mean, if they don't put the address, like I put coming soon, and I'll put a picture of the property with no address. Yeah. I'll give a description even with no address. All right. We've already talked about SELM. And SELM applies if you truly mean to keep it as a pocket listing, or you're just using the trick I taught you so that you have an active listing while you prepare for market.
So what does that SELM stand?
Seller instruction to exclude from the multiple listing service. But again, you don't need to know that. Because if you know the acronym, you can type that into the search bar and zip forms. And they change names all the time. Like I told you, modification. I'm not sure if it's modification of existing terms or listing now. They change them on us all the time. Just know that keyword, type it in, and read all of the results that come up, and you'll select the right one. You see something that says modification of listing, you know that that's the right one. You don't see that, and all you see is modification of existing terms, you know that that's the right one, right? But they either made them to or decided to combine them, and they're starting to do that with a lot of documents lately. So make sure you look at everything that pops up when you're searching for something. Clear cooperation policy does not apply. Our brokerage is probably not going to ever allow this. This means I'm not cooperating to try to sell your property. I'm not required to provide other agents with opportunity or information. So basically, you're okay with me only trying to sell it myself to my potential clients or existing clients. I don't think the seller is going to be okay with that. And I don't believe the brokerage would be okay with that, even if the seller is. All right, 8 is about, MLS data on the internet. I'm so sorry, seller, but no, we can't hide the sales price. Yes, it has to be accurate. Yes, the days on market are going to show Yes, people will be able to get your mailing address and contact info and know about what you purchased it for. It is what it is. Yes, photos will be on the internet. You can ask the MLS to remove all but one photo if you like, after something closes with written instruction from either the new homeowner or the, I don't think you can do it from the previous, but the new homeowner. Let's see here. All right, the next one is comments and reviews, automated estimate of value. So once you go to the MLS, the property goes onto Zillow, Redfin, all of these sites, right? And they have these automated systems, which they give an estimated dollar amount of what they think the value of the property is. These numbers are oftentimes inaccurate, right? Maybe it says something significantly less than what you told the seller you think the property is worth. I still strongly discourage the seller from going in and making it so that there is a functionality where you can tell Zillow, no, you're not allowed to post an estimated value of my property. However, it won't show your property all of that's done, at least the last time I tried to do it, which admittedly was several years ago. So I advise my sellers, you don't want to not be on Redfin and Zillow, because no matter if someone's working with an agent or not, most buyers look at that instead of what we send them. They don't listen to us until they realize they should be listening to us. And every once in a while, the MLS has glitches, and something that meets criteria won't get sent out. I've seen it before, not often, but it does happen. It is what it is. So I advise my clients against this. Seller representations, just a contractual paragraph here is that, you know, if the seller is not paying their mortgage, has a notice of default, like all of this needs to be disclosed to the agent. Why? Because we're investing our time and money. And if the seller's in a position where they might not own the property, you know, there could be a foreclosure, there's a problem with the sale that they're aware of, yet they entered into this contract and didn't disclose it, you have legal recourse. Though again, I've never seen this enforced. They also have to move forward in good faith once they accept an offer with trying to complete the sale. Broker and seller's duties, you know, it's your job to actually competently try to sell the house, right? What does this mean? It means that you need to show it. You should have open houses, like you need to do your job, right? And there are agents out there who do not. So if this happens, right, the seller has the ability to sue you for damages, or at least break contract at a bare minimum, right? This is legal grounds. So guys, do your job. Presentation of offers. An agent has to present every offer that they receive to a seller within a time frame that is as soon as reasonably possible. Define reasonably possible, I don't know. Does that mean if I get an offer while I'm you know, driving, that I need to pull over and tell the seller about it? No, but it probably does mean that I can do one of two things. Either when I stop driving, I should email it over to them, although they're instantaneously going to call me about it, want to talk about it and jump to conclusions because they don't understand it. Or I can call them or text them and say, I just received an offer. However, I'm driving. I'm headed to an appointment where I'm with a client. I'd like to send it over when I can discuss it with you. Do I have your permission to do that? If you have their permission in writing to send it over at a later date or time, you're able to do that. Okay. Even if your property is under contract in escrow with all contingencies removed, it's going to close tomorrow morning, and you receive an offer, you must present that to the seller. Okay. At no time is it ever okay to not present an offer to the seller as soon as possible. However, I've never heard of this happening. I don't see this happening. If the seller tells you and you maybe make an addendum, or you get, I wouldn't even say an email is good enough. I'd make an addendum or a modification to this. If your seller says, you know, maybe the property's listed at $1 million. Someone starts talking about making an offer at $600,000, and your seller says, I don't even want to see an offer at $600,000. You can say, well, legally, I have to present them to you unless you give me written instruction not to present offers to you that don't have a certain price or don't meet a certain criteria. That's the only instance in which that can be the case. Okay. Buyer letters, it is up to the seller whether or not they want to allow buyers to send love letters with their offers. You guys know what those are? Buyer, you know, sending a letter with their offer saying, oh, I love your house seller. Oh, I'm gonna take care of it. Oh, I'm gonna make dreams happen here. You know, you're the best. Your house is the best. I can see that you lovingly took care of it. And the state is trying to discourage us from doing it so that we don't inadvertently cause discrimination. A lot of times there are photos or references that might indicate someone's political, religious, or ancestry standing. I don't know. I like them for my sellers, but I ask them, it's up to them. It's not. All right, investigations and reports. So if the seller has any reports in their possession, they need to provide them to you, okay? I don't necessarily actually use Section E here. I don't contractually bind them to giving me anything, because what if they recollect what they have incorrectly, or they can't find it? No, just look, if you have anything, send it to me. That's how I do it with them. Sometimes an agent might say to a seller, I think it's really important that we have a pre-market inspection. And that's because I see something horribly wrong that any buyer is going to see. And I explain to my seller like this, it is in your best interest, because anything I see, someone else is going to see, the other agent's going to see, the buyer's inspector is going to find. And this is probably going to end up as something that they request a credit for or just cancel over, or they want you to repair. Wouldn't you like to know what is going on independently? Because who knows if we can trust the buyer's inspector and or whoever is giving them estimates, right? Let's find out what's going on. So we can either provide documentation saying nothing's going on, this is all superficial, whatever. We can go ahead and fix the facade so it's not really a question. Or this is a problem, this is how much it costs. Please make your offers reflecting the cost of this repair, or please know the seller's not going to make this repair, or we're willing to credit you for this dollar amount in advance for the repair. So make the offer as if that credit's already in place. And this is important to protect the seller's purchase price, right? Sometimes they have the money and we can just take care of the repair, we disclose that it was done and we're all good. And now we have documentation proving that. Yes.
What happens if the seller does not want to run a report? And you do want to run the report, would you pay for the report?
I might, if I might pay for the report myself if the seller won't, although someone who won't pay for an inspection report when it's that important is probably indicative of a non-cooperative seller that I wouldn't, at least at this point in my career, really want to work with. It really depends on how arbitrary the cost was. I'm doing something to help them. Most agents, or not most, but some agents wouldn't even think of this. Like, I'm already like doing them a service by trying to protect their sales price. So I might, I mean, it's your business, it's your decision to make. It probably depends upon, yeah, the situation.
Would you just do that if you saw something, or would you?
It'd have to be
try
pretty bad. Like, I have to see major wood damage, which indicates wood rot, termite damage. This is also important because what if what we find is so expensive that there's no possibility the seller can pay for it or even sell their property with a credit for this dollar amount, right? You might find this with structural issues, geological issues, foundational issues, things like that. I don't want to take that fucking listing. So yes, I might insist, and if they don't do it, I would then decide if I want to pay for that inspection or not, or walk. Yeah. It'd have to be pretty bad though for me to be like, we need to do this. Sometimes it's not bad. You know, like I was recently involved in a sale where in a listing where there were cracks all the way almost through the ceiling, quite a few of them. Cracks that are that long and go all the way through can be really indicative of structural. So we told the seller that. He did have someone come out to inspect it. They said it's because whoever put the plastering used a material that's not typically used. It's more like concrete. It doesn't expand and retract very well with heat and cold. And it's a valley property. There's a lot of heat and cold differences, right? But he listened to us, and right, no big deal. So we had the facade work done. We made it a disclosure on the seller's disclosures. And guess what? Another crack popped up in another part of the ceiling in another place in the house. And we were able to say, when someone was like, I think you've got some major problems here, we were able to say, no, we had an inspector out. I can send you the report. This is actually because of the material that was used for the plaster. And that buyer made an offer. Who knows if they would have made an offer if we weren't able to say exactly that, right? That's why.
You were proactive.
Yeah, proactive, exactly. But again, I wouldn't use this section, but it's a great talking point. All right, we don't hold deposits, guys. Deposits go directly to escrow. That's really the only option in a purchase agreement, so you don't have to worry about section 11. Agency relationships, we've already talked about. This box will always already be checked because disclosure regarding agency will always be included with every contract. Okay. Same thing with potentially competing sellers and buyers. We already have that possible representation of more than one buyer and seller. Security, insurance, showings, audio, and video. Though there's nothing to complete here, this is a really important discussion you need to have with your seller. Very important. Security. Hey, seller. Well, at least me, I will never allow any unaccompanied showings in your home. And while it will always be myself or one of my team agents who's familiar with your home showing the property, there will also be open houses, and while we will do our best to be diligent, we hope that you have such a big turnout that it's not possible to watch what's going on in every room at the same time, So it's important that you secure your valuables and lock in some, locked away or take them with you. It's important that you remove prescription medications because it's also something that can be stolen. It is important that you remove any spare keys to anything in your home because while that is not an item of value, it could lead to someone taking them and coming back, to steal something at some later point in time. And oftentimes before my first open house or showing, I walk around the place and all that stuff is still out. So I'll have to go through them another time. Again, with security, if your clients have audio or visual surveillance, you'll need to ask them. The reason for this is because it's not technically legal to take video recording or audio recording of someone from the public when you have a public event like an open house. A showing, sure, it's a private event. You as their agent, sure, that's different. But it's not legal to film or record the public in any way without their knowledge. So you'll post a sign that says that this property is under audio and or visual surveillance. And if it's not, ladies, I have been in some instances with some really fucked up weird people in open houses that scared the shit out of me where I've actually left and called the police. Do not put yourself in that situation. I ask my buyers and sellers, or I ask my sellers, is it okay, even though you don't have this, for my personal safety, if I post this sign up at the front door anywhere or anyhow, so that anyone who enters the property can see it? It would make me feel safer. I've never had a seller say no. Okay. Am I sure that that would avoid any potential weirdness? No, but it has never happened to me since I've started doing that. And I want to be as safe as possible. Right. Side note, but showings, guys, if you're showing someone that you don't know, an unrepresented party, make sure someone knows where you're at, when you should be back, if I don't call you by this time, call me. Do that stuff. And gentlemen too. I'm not saying that, horrible people don't want to target you as well. They do. Equal opportunity killers. Also, I'll tell my clients anything like shiny, kids will be through, or that's really fragile or easily breakable, precarious, I'll tell my clients too. Photographs and internet advertising, seller. So, you may want to remove personal items or photos, anything that you're not comfortable with someone possibly taking a photo of when they're present in the property. Okay. Key safe lockbox. All right, so the way that our contract is written, boilerplate says we can put a Supra lockbox there or a combo lockbox. However, most clients don't want that. I never do it. I advise against it. I might consider it if I explain this to a seller. It was unoccupied, that there wasn't staging in there, and maybe it was kind of far away, or I was super busy, and the seller was totally okay with that. Otherwise, I just do accompanied showings. So I generally have this box checked. 15A does not. However, there is an instance where I would have it checked, even though I never plan on or unchecked, even though I never plan on having unaccompanied showings. That is because perhaps the seller is more comfortable with me hiding a lockbox that only myself and my team access, versus me making 5 copies of their key and giving one to each of my team agents, right? So I'll give them that option. But I make it very clear that no one is accessing this lockbox except for myself and my team. Tenant occupied property. If there is a tenant there, you do need to get written permission. And I believe on Carform KLA, I believe the tenant has to sign it as well. Pretty sure. I haven't had that situation. Sign. So the way the contract is written says the seller does authorize broker to install a for sale or sold sign. Well, whether or not the seller is okay with it, if it's Beverly Hills, you can only have a certain size sign. So that's just something to note to yourself. You probably don't have that sign. So if you're taking a Beverly Hills listing, you're probably going to have to order a custom sign, and you need a permit from the city for it, a sticker that goes on it. I have one if anyone needs one that expires at the end of the year that I'm happy to hand out. I actually put double-sided tape on the back of it so that I can take it on and off pretty easily. Some HOAs don't allow signs at all. Some sellers do not want signs at all. I had a seller who was concerned that it might indicate to people that the house could be vacant and it might be targeted for theft. You know, people think things. So there are regulations, just be aware of them. Bless you. Your sneeze is so cute. Additional terms, we've already talked about this, right? If you need an addendum, you put that here. If there was a short sale, you check this box. Sometimes these forms, when you check this box, they auto-populate in your transaction file and zip forms. Sometimes they do not, so keep track of them, because if they don't auto-populate, you'll have to add them and remember to attach them. Okay. Remember I said if the property is held, the title of the property is held in the name of the trust, you need a trust advisor, you check this box. I think that one does auto-populate, but again, just keep a little running tally of anything that you've said and who you're going to attach. Just like when you're writing an email and you say see below attachment, thank God Gmail finally has that thing that says, do you need to attach an attachment? There's nothing attached here. I'm like, oh, great. I don't have to look like an idiot. Attach it. You don't want to look like an idiot with your listing contract, right? Any free-form stuff you wrote in here, great if it fits, but remember, be careful with that. I mean, this is pretty much it. There's a management approval, so you can't cancel a listing, only Michael Rosales' signature can, just so you know. Successors and or assigned, technically, anyone who inherits a property if the seller passes away that has an active listing with you is bound to continue with the listing with you. You're a big jerk if you do that to them. You should be releasing any descendants from the obligation to sell the property under the current listing agreement with you if whoever left it to them just died. Don't be a dick. Dispute resolution. Contract says that there'd be mediation, arbitration. Ownership, title, and authority. The seller basically saying, yes, I'm actually the owner of the property. I have authority to sell. Sometimes you'll see something on title, like a husband and wife, but only the husband is there. And he says they've been divorced. The property is now his. Maybe it just hasn't updated in public records yet. If that's the case, you'll get a copy of whatever court order. You'll provide it to the title company you intend to work with. And that title rep will tell you whether or not this is legitimate. And if you'll need any subsequent documents once you open escrow, like a secondary, just to confirm, interspousal transfer deed, also referred to as a quitclaim deed. Sometimes they'll say, no, that's not the case. Sometimes there's a death and the surviving spouse isn't aware of the process, so you can get information from the title rep at this time. They'll need a certificate of the death certificate, an affidavit of death of joint tenant, things like that. You want to handle them gently, right? And you can get started with it. You should get started with it right away because it takes some time to get these documents. You can't get them right away. And as we all know, the city and county isn't always a fast and moving party when you need something from them. All right, and then last but not least, representative capacity. So I told you there would be additional documentation if there was an entity owner on title. So for the trust, we have the trust advisory, and you'd also need this representative capacity. Any other entity other than a trust, it's just going to be this representative capacity. Representative capacity for a listing agreement is CAR form RCSD-S. It stands for Representative Capacity Signature Disclosure, -S. And this document explains who the person signing on behalf of the entity is in relation to the entity and what authority they have to act on behalf of the entity, right? So if I have a trust, it can be named Christen Tull Trust, dated blah, blah, blah. It can be named whatever. It can be named My Dog Zemo Trust, right? That's not indicative of whose trust it is. But even my Christen Tull Trust, I can have a co-trustee on it. And until the title company has a copy of the trust, they don't know that there's a co-trustee. Guess what? If I have a co-trustee and the trust dictates that both of our signatures are required to sell the property, and you only have mine on your listing agreement, you don't have a valid listing agreement. So you definitely want this representative capacity signature disclosure, and you definitely want to get started with title, finding out what documentation you need to verify that ownership and title is held as it needs to be. Sometimes you'll have to record documents. Sometimes it's just verification. Okay. There are 2 RCSDs. The -S stands for seller, because a buyer can be an entity as well, right? So sometimes we'll have a -S in a transaction. Sometimes we'll have a -B. Sometimes we'll have both. Right. Then all of the sellers must sign. And guys, those entity owners, if you use a DocuSign plugin for electronic signatures with zip forms and you enter an entity like 123 LLC, it's going to put as a signature line 123 LLC. That is not a signature. A signature is a natural person's name. I am Christen Tull, managing member of 123 LLC. And so in DocuSign, you will have to modify that signature line to say Christen Tull, not 123 LLC. 123 LLC is not a signature. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so watch for that plugin fault. Also, just a cautionary reminder, the DocuSign plugin with zip forms or any electronic signature plugin doesn't highlight the optional fields. So like in a residential purchase agreement, almost all clients want to sign arbitration and mediation clauses. It's not clear, and clients just, when they're signing, they're just clicking. There's an option to say, yes, I want to sign this or not. They just usually say next, and they miss it, whether or not they intended to sign that arbitration clause. Less common documents, like representative capacity, they don't even tag correctly. So you cannot trust that DocuSign plugin. You must check everything, including altering names and things like that, okay? All right, you sign it. If there is more than one broker, that doesn't mean more than one agent. So Connie, if you and I co-list, we can sign this together. We don't need any additional documents unless you and I want an additional a commission sharing agreement outlining contractually who's taking what commission, who's covering what cost and how, right? We might have that agreement for us. But if I was at Compass and I was co-listing a property with Connie, and that's up to the seller, right? We're from 2 different brokerages. And so you have to check this box here and fill out card form ABA. All right. That's it. Does anyone have any questions? I know there was kind of an off-topic question. That's welcome at this time. Yes. Why can't you print it?
Okay.
If you remind me when I'm done answering questions, I don't
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
What was the next? Yes.
On the LLC, if I change, like, let's say it's the company 123 LLC, can I put comma and then the signer's name?
No, you should not.
Okay.
Your contract should only say 123 LLC under seller, and the signature line should only say the signer's name. You're welcome. Occasionally, you'll have an attorney involved who thinks they know better than you and will make you do a certain way. Just do it your way. The title company and escrow company will correct them later, and you'll fix it at that point in time. Any other questions? How about at home, guys? No?
All good, thank you.
Good, thank you. Amazing.
Yeah, I have in order to print documents easily, you should set up a dummy file. I have 1, 2, 3 example street. You have to enter client names and an address in there in order to be able to print out a card form. You have to set up a transaction, like a fake one. I have a test and I have a 1, 2, 3 example street. Put in a fake address and put in a fake buyer and seller, or you cannot print that document. Unless that document only has the buyer or only has the seller. And yes, I'll print it out for you now.
Okay, thank you.
You're gonna print out one of those?
So which print room is it?
That one, and I'm not making a mistake.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I also?
Uh,
You know what, I'll.
I'll do one more, but I mean, I don't have So I have free printing with the office. The
Yeah.
office likes to charge agents
Yes.
for that, but because of what I do here, it's part of my compensation.
So would it be all right?
Yeah, except it's taking a while, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't know I was in your way.
Have a nice day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
I actually.
Bye, guys. Have a great week.